Rogge Dunn, labor law attorney here in Dallas. Thank you so much and welcome to Eye on Politics.
Thank you, Jack.
So we've seen a lot of commentary about Charlie Kirk's assassination. A lot of people have even gotten into trouble because of some of the remarks they've made on social media, some people even fired. And people are wondering, what about that person who was fired? What about their First Amendment free speech rights?
Well, a lot of people don't know it, but as an employee, you don't have any First Amendment speech rights. The only exception to that is if you speak out about terms and working conditions at your employer. We're not getting paid overtime. We don't have enough vacation time. The benefits aren't good, or the workplace is unsafe. They don't have an eye flush here at the manufacturing facility. They don't have enough fire extinguishers or defibrillators that are required by law. Though that type of speech about the workplace is protected by the NLRB. But First Amendment does not protect individual employees that are employed by private employers.
Even if they are not on duty at the time of the comment?
A lot of people don't realize, but employers today are regulating off-premises activities of employees. There's employers that say you can't smoke. You can't smoke ever. And they'll give you a blood test. And if you have nicotine, they can fire you. They may say if you are arrested, just arrested, not convicted, for domestic abuse, you're fired. You get arrested for DUI, you're fired. So yes, employers have been doing that. And we also saw this when there were people who made comments in social media accounts that were anti-Black Lives Matters, and those companies fired some of those employees, and they had no free speech ability to sue over it.
And so the takeaway for people watching this is if they are employed by a private company, maybe they want to check with their employer, human resources, to find out what exactly their rules are, code of conduct?
Well, I'd say keep your mouth shut. I mean, when you go and ask an employer, well, can I say this? You're going to create a lot of consternation, and your boss might say, hey, you got a big mouth, you're a troublemaker, and you're causing us to have to spend all this employee time figuring out what you can or can't say, and then you say something and you thought you had permission, and they say you didn't have permission, you went a bridge too far. My advice is don't say it.
Now, before you said this is of private employers, but when you work for a government, federal, state, or even local, or school district, municipal, it's different. Is that right?
That's right. So the First Amendment prevents the government, and the government only, from abridging your free speech rights. So no matter what governmental entity, whether it's the Department of Justice, whether it's a local school district, you do have free speech protections.
And so what we are seeing right now is the Texas Education Agency, as you and I are talking, tells me that they are investigating 281 complaints filed by the public against teachers' comments that they've seen post on social media that they thought was inappropriate in reaction to Charlie Kirk's assassination. So what do you make of that?
Well, I make of it, it depends on what they said, okay? There's a couple of nuances for free speech protections for teachers, for example. Number one is if they make the statement in their official capacity. If they're teaching a class and they make the statement, it probably is not going to be protected speech. If they make it as a personal expression of their own personal views, it's going to be protected unless it is extremely vulgar or it's inciting violence or riots. It's the proverbial, you can't yell fire in a crowded movie theater. You couldn't yell fire in a classroom when there's no fire.
And so what do you say to people, I mean, I've read comments, well, I don't think that teacher should be around students if they make what I think is an inappropriate comment about whether they're mocking the assassination. I didn't like this guy, I didn't like what he said. So what do you say to that?
Well, I'd say, my mother was a teacher at the DISD, and I don't think if you've ever been to a PTA meeting that you're going to find every parent happy with every aspect of every teacher. So the fact that some parents are upset with what a teacher's saying, is not grounds to fire that teacher unless the teacher has crossed the line with that comment such that it's extremely vulgar or it is inciting violence.
And we've seen this past week, the TEA Commissioner, Mike Morath, clarified his statement to say that there is a difference between something that is distasteful or in poor taste versus something that incites violence. But even then, what's the definition of inciting violence, right? Because there has to be an urgent public safety danger or threat, isn't that right?
Yes, that standard's been set by the U.S. Supreme Court, and it is a difficult standard. And I think that's why the commissioner walked back his original statement, because he knows that just because a teacher said something distasteful is not going to be grounds to discharge that teacher, and that teacher could go to court and challenge and most likely would win their case.
Now, is it any different if there is a code of conduct by that school district that lays out, hey, we don't want you commenting? Does that change things, or is that a prior restraint on free speech?
That is a great question, and I agree with you. I think that's a prior restraint on free speech. In other words, if their code of conduct says you won't make comments about politics or religion or abortion, you are saying you can't exercise your personal opinions, your free speech. So I think that would not be upheld.
And so if somebody is just looking at it and saying, okay, I understand about the government, and keeping people as far as free speech is concerned. But if they're looking at, well, what's the difference between an employee who's just going about doing their job in the public sector versus the private sector, if it's in the course of, just doing their job and they're, one is making a comment just like the other person does, how is that government interfering in a free speech right if we're just talking about people just going to work and doing their jobs?
Well, are you talking about government interference with government employees, or are you talking?
I mean, in other words, it doesn't have to be a teacher, it could be it could be anybody, right?
A prosecutor, a police officer.
Right, or anybody in the public sector, but even, let's take it from, let's say, a secretary in your office versus a secretary at a government, at a
Police department,
school district, you name it. And they're just going with the same function.
Totally different standard.
Totally different standard.
Yeah, and you I guess you'd have to ask Benjamin Franklin and the founders of the Constitution why they put that limit only on the government. Now, if you ask me, does that make sense? I think it may make some sense, right? If you're a private employer and your job is to make money and you have shareholders or you have mouths to feed employees, you don't want an employee coming to the workplace with a t-shirt that says abortion is murder and here's a picture of a fetus that's a very upsetting photo, and then all your employees are talking and arguing and debating pro-choice versus pro-life. And they're distracted from work, they get angry, they hold a grudge against somebody. So I can see a legitimate reason why an employer would say we don't want our employees talking about politics, religious issues, and controversial public and social issues that are out there.
We've been talking about public school teachers a lot because of this TEA investigation, but we've also seen examples of college professors being fired, etc. And if they are a state university,
they're covered.
It's a government, they're gonna run into the same issue, right?
Exactly.
And so, just going back to this TEA investigation, if there are 281 complaints right now, what do you think the percentage will be of these teachers being fired? Because that's a higher standard as what you said.
I don't know. I mean, and that's really up to the commissioner. I don't know what
It's still up to the local school district.
Well, sure, true. You're exactly right. But if the commissioner puts pressure on the local school district and they conduct their investigation, I can see some pressure from up high on these school districts.
So let me ask you, because there was also an example at Texas State University this week of a student being expelled because he was accused of mocking Charlie Kirk actually being shot, being assassinated. And the governor chimed in on his X account saying, expel this student immediately, and then he was. So is that this is a different standard because this is a student, right? So talk to me about
Well, I think the standard's going to be the same whether you're a student or a teacher or an intern at the police department. If the government is taking action against you, adverse, whether it's firing, whether it's suspending a student or a teacher, that still is abridging your free speech rights. So the question becomes, did what the student say, was it a personal expression, or did it go so far as to incite violence?
And do you think that the student may have a legal case against the university?
I would think the student would have a legal case, and eventually a jury would decide, is that mocking such that it's going to incite people to violence?
The other big news that we've seen happen this week is that ABC Entertainment indefinitely suspended Jimmy Kimmel. And there have been a lot of people upset about this, saying First Amendment, that kind of thing. What's your take on that?
Well, the network or the news organization.
It would be the network,
Okay.
not news.
Okay, all right. I'm sorry.
Entertainment.
The ABC Entertainment is a private employer, and they have the right to suspend or fire Jimmy Kimmel or any other employee for making statements that they think are not in the best interest of the company. And that, not just statements, but let's say Jimmy Kimmel was seen out drunk on Rodeo Drive. And they say, you're not comporting yourself with how we want our evening host to behave in public, and we're firing you for that, or suspending you, or fining you, or whatever.
Business decision then?
Yes, a company, ABC, can make a business decision to suspend, fire, or fine any employee, including a celebrity evening host, for anything they say, and including anything they do. If they show up on Rodeo Drive drunk, or they're being obnoxious at the Super Bowl, then they can say you're not comporting yourself with the ethics and the principles and the decorum that we expect our employees to use.
Even though the FCC commissioner who holds licenses, which holds a license, administers the licenses from the companies that own television stations, was very critical of Jimmy Kimmel's comments. And so people are pointing to that as saying that could be a threat right there, First Amendment, et cetera. What do you make of that?
Well, I think that would be tough because you've got some hurdles to jump, but I suppose you could fashion an argument. The FCC said this is not something we want said, and ABC somehow thought they had to do it or did it because the FCC made that statement. But I don't think ABC's ever going to admit that. ABC is going to say we made a business decision, and that's it. The flip side, of course, is if ABC had said, no, we're not firing Jimmy Kimmel, and FCC had somehow said we're taking him off the air, then Jimmy Kimmel and ABC would have First Amendment rights against the FCC, and I think they would have won that case.
But because this wasn't government coming after, taking action against the TV station owners, the network also owns TV stations, because of that, this looks, in your eyes, as just a pure and simple business decision.
Yes, you hit the nail on the head. It wasn't a government action. If there's a government action that fires somebody, okay, then your free speech kicks into play.
Right. It was only comments that the FCC commissioned.
Correct.
Not a government action.
Right. The FCC didn't say, we are not allowing Jimmy Kimmel on the air, or ABC, if you have Jimmy Kimmel on the air, we're canceling your licensing agreement.
Well, they can't do that anyway, right?
Probably not, yeah, but they could threaten, they can make things very difficult.
Rogge Dunn, labor law attorney in Dallas. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jack. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, we appreciate it.